Welcome to the University of New Hampshire's Department of Theater and Dance podcast series. For more information about our department, please visit www.unh.edu/theater-dance.
The Paul Arts Center was built in 1960, and I came out for a job interview in the spring of 1961, and then I joined the faculty in the fall. And at that time, the Hennessy Theater was called the Experimental Theater because it has not been dedicated yet. And eventually, of course, it was dedicated for Bill Hennessy, whose picture is in the lobby. And it's a wonderful picture of him. He's had a big head and a deep baritone voice. And every year he used to come over to my advanced acting class and read some Shakespeare. Now, when I say Bill Hennessy read Shakespeare, he did it from memory. He'd say, now, in the third act of Othello, and suddenly this voice would come out as he would, by memory, just recite these lines. He was a wonderful teacher of Shakespeare, and he was the original director in the 1920s and did the first plays as such that were done, and they were done over in New Hampshire Hall. But in 1960, the theater was built, and at that time, the head of the department was Joe Batchelor, and they said, now, we have this space underneath the auditorium, and you can have your choice. Would you like to put in hydraulic lifters, which will elevate the orchestra pit so it will be stage level, and then drop it down so that you can have a 25-piece orchestra in it? Or would you like something else? And in his wisdom, Joe Batchelor said, just leave it empty. He said, that's what we want. It'll be a black box experimental theater. The nice thing about the original Hennessy empty space was you could do proscenium, you could do three-quarter theater, that is like a Shakespearean stage, a thrust that goes out into the audience. You could do theater in the round. You could do anything because everything was movable. And in my first week of acting class, I always said, we must start with an empty space. You decide how much room you need, and you can put one chair on one side and one chair on the other, and that's the width of the space. And you can put a chair at the back to show how deep you need it. So for a man to kill his enemy, does he need a phone booth, or does he need a kitchen, or does he need a large ballroom? He said, you decide how much action you want to take place. I was the director of theater, so a year after I took my job, I hired Gil Davenport, who was then our principal designer until 1996 when he retired. During that time, he adored the Hennessy Theater. He felt the Hennessy Theater could be any kind of theater. And one of the first things we did was I was very interested in programs that used a number of documents from a person's life to kind of create the essence of that person's life. And so I wrote a program called The Evidence of William Blake, and we got every piece of evidence that we could find. He did paintings, he did engravings, he wrote many poems, and so I said to Gil, I have a friend down at the Harvard Library where I had done my dissertation, and she will give us a complete set of the slides that William Blake made for Paradise Lost, which she had copied from the originals that are at the Boston MFA. So I said, so we got those. I said, we also have a lot of black and white prints. And at that time, this was some years after the war, and you could buy what was called airplane photographic paper, I guess, which was sheets of photographic paper that were about 4 feet high, maybe, and a roll 60 feet long. So all you had to do is to cut off as much as you want and then project. And we did all the projections in the green room. It would, cover all the light sources, and Gil would turn on the projector and expose it for a certain length of time. And then we had great tubs for developer and fixing solution, and we would slosh it back and forth until the image came out, and then we would put the whole thing on plywood. And so we had these pictures, the paintings of William Blake, that were about 5 feet high, and I think we had 8 or 9 of them on the Hennessy walls. But Gil felt that they couldn't just be on the bare walls, so he bought enough burlap to cover all of the walls, and then the performers stood on the platforms where usually the audience would be sitting, and the audience was in the middle, and they performed in front of all of the paintings.